From the center of the universe and the home of your Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts,
it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos post-game reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing, as the Toronto Argonauts beat the Ottawa Redblacks 27-22 in Ottawa, and in doing so set a franchise record, tie a CFL record, and also establish a different record. We'll get into all that. We'll talk about the game, break some things down, go with our players of the game, plays of the game, all that more coming up in just a second. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about Something in the Water Brewing. You got to get down to Something in the Water Brewing for the East Final. We're going to have something going on pre-game. Remember, the game starts at 3 o'clock. We're going to have something going on before that. They've got a great setup there. They're in Liberty Village, just a few steps from BMO Field, not far from Lamport Stadium either, with where the Argos do their practicing. But it's a great place to grab a beer pre-game. You can get some Longboat Pale Ale, which I've got going on beside me here. Longboat Pale Ale, the beer that was made for fans of the Double Blue. So make sure you check out Something in the Water Brewing.
It's a great place to pay a wager to your betting superior as well.
It's true. We'll have to get into that in our pregame walkthrough this week. But yes, JB, he has no more fleeces left. He did end up.
I focused too much. I focused too much on the picking. I cost myself.
That's true. JB beat me by one pick. So yeah, we're gonna have to go to Something in the Water, and we're doing flights or something like that, right? So
I believe.
All right, we'll have to figure that out, and we'll have to document that, I think, as well. We'll see what we can do. All right, let's get into this game. First of all, let's talk about the record. It's amazing. Like for as long as the CFL has been playing 18-game seasons, to go back through the history and to only have had one previous team get to 16 wins, and the Toronto Argonauts, despite the fact that for the last third of the season we're rotating guys on rest, still ended up with 16 wins. It's a remarkable thing. Their starter, Chad Kelly, was 15-0 in games that he started and finished. And then Cam Dukes, and with so many starters resting in today's game, you've got Davaris Daniels that's out, you got AJ Ouellette is out, Andrew Harris obviously still out. DeMonte Coxey didn't play. You have Hendricks and all the guys on defense as well. Stiggers was out. Winter McManus. Like it was a rest day. This was like the game last year at the end of the season, and like the game 2 years ago at the end of the season against Edmonton. But this one finished very differently with the Argos on top, and to be able to do both of those things was pretty remarkable. This is a historic mark, and JB, I think it's important that, like, regardless of what goes forward, and I know it's not going to mean anything to a lot of people if they don't win the Grey Cup, but to go 16-2 in a CFL season is just unbelievable.
Yeah, I find it so frustrating when I hear TV people or various media people talk about, well, they did that now, let's see if they can win it. Like, what kind of attitude is that? Like, to dismiss everything you did in the regular season, then why have a regular season? I mean, it's ridiculous. Of course you want to win the championship, but to say not winning the championship invalidates winning all these games. There may be players who believe that, and I understand why from a player point of view. But I mean, from a neutral perspective, objective perspective, to not celebrate this record and to say that it is only worthy if they win the championship is preposterous, and anybody who says it should rethink their profession of covering regular season football games.
And yet we know that is what matters. Like, that we know, like we've talked about examples, like you and I have talked about examples, whether it's the 2007 Patriots or the 1989 team from Edmonton, they don't get talked about. There's always an asterisk next to it of, oh yeah, but they didn't win. But those were remarkably good teams. But it seems to be how it is. Like, if you don't win the Grey Cup, if you don't win the Super Bowl, if you don't win whatever it is.
True. It is an overwhelming aspect of it. It is.
And I don't think it's just football either. I think
no, it's not.
It's all sports.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I mean, it is frustrating because it does sort of increase the belief that the regular season is a almost complete waste of time.
Let's talk about the other record too, which I think is interesting. Although, again, it worries me in a way. But the other one is that the Argos finished with a 10-0 record against the East Division. No team in CFL history has ever finished 10-0 in their division, which is a pretty amazing mark. So they've got 4 wins over Hamilton, 3 over Montreal, 3 over Ottawa, and this year the East did really well against the West. And so there's not even that argument of, oh yeah, but it's the East Division. No, the East Division was in many ways the tougher division. Now, I think, I don't know if I really believe that, because I think that there were 2 real juggernauts to contend with in the West, but Montreal down the stretch played as well as anybody, and Hamilton as well in those last few games really turned it on. And those teams, they did well against the West. They beat up on the West teams. So that's a remarkable achievement too, to be the only team in CFL history to go undefeated in their division with 9 or more games. No team has gone 9-0 in their division. No team has gone 10-0 in their division.
Yeah, I mean it just speaks to, why we thought the team was so good way back in camp, is just incredibly deep. They have, they're bringing Hadel out today and he's making huge catches. I mean, they just go 6 or 7 fantastic players at every position. It's something really to behold. And you saw tonight where Ottawa desperately wanted to win that game at home against Toronto's B/C plus team, and honestly, they were never in it.
It's pretty unbelievable, actually, to think about the fact that Ottawa had most of their starters going. They were trying to win in front of their home crowd. They were trying to get to rushing and passing marks, and they wwere stuck at the end, like feeding the ball to Williams, trying to get him over that 1,000-yard mark, when really they should have been going hurry up and passing the ball downfield. But they felt like, I'm sure they felt like that would have been taken care of earlier on. But yeah, pretty unbelievable that the Argos could roll out. And it's not just this game, but I think this game really stands out to me because it was the most starters that the Argos had rested, and they're playing against a team that wasn't doing the same.
I mean, obviously I do, but I really do, even as an objective fan, hope we get a Winnipeg-Toronto Grey Cup. I think that will be a titanic battle.
I think so too. Because I think Winnipeg is an excellent team. I hope that, so much stuff can happen, right? Like we don't. Toronto could very well go out there and lose in the East Final. It's football and things happen, and I would be surprised by that, but I could totally see it happening. I could see Winnipeg losing in the West Final as well. Football is weird sometimes. Strange stuff happens, like strange stuff like we saw tonight. Like, who thought that Benji Franklin was going to get an interception tonight? He wasn't even supposed to be dressed. He wasn't supposed to be dressed tonight. He ends up on the field because there was a late scratch. I think it was Jamie Harry was a late scratch, had a little bit of tightness pregame. So they end up activating Benji Franklin. He gets out there, gets a pick, almost gets a second pick, and was unbelievable in coverage as well. So it's weird stuff happens sometimes. Let's get into talking a little bit about the specifics in this game, JB. Let's start with Cameron Dukes. I thought he looked as good as he has looked. Again, without starting receivers, he did have the starting offensive line, which is huge because so often you're trying to evaluate backup quarterbacks and you've got the backup O-line in there, and it's impossible to do that when everyone's a backup. With receivers, it's still tough, but with a starting O-line, you at least got to look at Dukes. He ends up completing 65% of his passes for 317 yards, led the team in rushing by a mile because Toronto could not run the ball tonight from their backs. What do you think of his play today?
Well, I mean, again, I have been hard on him, and he has come through. He doesn't always look the prettiest, but he is kind of a streaky guy, and he does come in and get wins. I think he's not a player who is being groomed to be a starter, in my opinion, But if you're looking for kind of a scrappy guy who's going to come in and he can drive the car without putting it in the ditch, he's your man.
Yeah, I think he's the perfect backup. He's got, in his sort of 3 bits of extended action that we've seen, he took Winnipeg into the fourth quarter. He had the lead when he was taken out, and then the lead evaporated quickly after that. He came back in at the end and couldn't pull it out. In Saskatchewan, he leads them from behind. We talked about that, obviously, for a long time in that game against Saskatchewan. That last miracle drive, Sandani and Coxie, and he gets the win there. And then here he plays the full game, which is a huge surprise. I thought he'd play a half. I thought we'd see Brian Scott for a half. I don't know what's going on there. It's a really odd situation to me. This would have been the perfect time, I think, to get some kind of look at Brian Scott, but they clearly decided that Dukes is the guy they wanted to evaluate more, or maybe even just Dukes is the guy they want to get ready. And they just don't foresee Brian Scott as being a this year piece. Like, that's the only thing I can think from it, because if they had any thoughts about him being involved this year, he would have played.
I think they've been pretty clear on their stance on him.
Very.
So no, I know. I thought he played. I can't say great, but he gets it done. He's like a baseball hitter, hits 265, and pretty good. Not great, pretty good. Got the job done. I wish I could get more excited about it. But
that's I think we have different expectations from backup quarterback. Like, that's what I want from a backup quarterback. We've seen some terrible backup quarterbacks in the CFL. There are guys that come in and just like immediately set everything on fire. And it's like, what is happening here?
He does not turn the ball over. He makes smart plays with the ball. He throws a decent deep ball. He can run for first downs. Yeah, I agree. I have come around on him. I still don't like him on the short yardage sneaks. I don't think he's actually that good at them. But I have come around on him. I think that he is a backup that you can count on heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. And I think we're kind of talking about the same thing, but I think our expectations from the backup are different. You want the backup to be Nathan Rourke and Chad Kelly.
I do, actually, yeah.
Yes, and that would be great. That would be awesome. But
but you're right. I mean, you're right to say it doesn't really work. Like, if you look at Fajardo or Caleros, or the guys who have come through and then moved on, it's probably better to have a backup who is not going to want to be a starter.
Yeah, it just doesn't, like, those guys don't, like, unless your starting quarterback is in his last year or something, Nathan Rourke's not a great example because then he left, but supposing he wasn't quite good enough to get to the NFL, that would have been a great scenario. You've got Michael Riley, who's a year away from retiring. You've got this guy who's going to be a star. Like, yes, that is perfect. No, it was too perfect because he's in the NFL now, but something like that, or McLeod Bethel-Thompson, Chad Kelly, that's great. That is the perfect scenario.
I do feel much more confident than I did a month ago about Duke. So I will say he has achieved that for sure.
I don't know what was going on with the run game. The line was having issues. The backs, Adeboboye getting hurt early really hurt the running game, and hopefully he's going to be okay. Coach said post game that it's a high ankle sprain. He's hopeful that with rehab he'd be able to get back for the East Final. Maybe, certainly having the bye is helpful, but I think that's going to be really. High
ankle sprains are tough. They're almost
for a running back too.
Yeah, they're almost always a month.
Yeah, so I don't know. Fingers crossed.
Unless you're Pat Mahomes for some reason.
Yeah, I know. There's some guys that seem to, but again, it's a different position. I think quarterback, you always have a bit of a different conversation. For running back, that's going to be really tough. And yeah, you can really tape it up, but his assets are really, because I'm expecting Harris to come back. I think it's going to be Ouellette and Harris as the primaries. So Adeboboye, you're really looking for his special teams prowess, and that's something that is going to really hurt him. Now, maybe just because of the lack of frequency with the plays, maybe it would be okay, but we're going to have to keep our eye on that going forward. That was just crushing to see, and I feared the worst when it happened because they brought the card out and everything, and I thought, oh man, this is this is a knee or a broken bone or something like that, at least with an ankle sprain, there's a chance. And so,
Yep. And that's the best wishes to him for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. And just even based on his family and himself, we love that family. He's a great guy and he works so hard. You hate to see something like that happen to a guy like that. So again, it could have been way worse. Fingers crossed for a quick recovery. But I think we saw again, like when McMahon came in as the primary back, we saw why McMahon can't really be the primary back. We talked about this before.
Nor should he be, right? Like that's not what he does any more than you want Unger to be your number one target, right? Like it's not what he's built for. It's not what he's there for. I think it's just a mismatch. So yeah, I think it's fine. He's when he was in that position, he's not built for that, and you can see from the turnover and from the lack of success, like he's a change of pace guy. He is not an every down guy.
And it's pretty amazing to me, like statistically, that he had a 5-yard run, he had like a 2-yard touchdown run, and ended up with -1 rushing yards on the evening, just to show you how poorly everything else was going. He had 7 carries for -1 yards with a touchdown.
I mean, if he's the running back and he's coming through, I don't think he's that hard to. He isn't that hard to stop. He needs to be somebody where you're loading up to stop power and then you get speed.
And he had a costly turnover, or what could have been costly, except that Ottawa seemed to want to turn the ball right back over again every time Toronto made a mistake. That Ottawa's like, no, here you go, you take it back again. So the running game, I don't know, it was a weird game. Nicastro, I thought, had a poor game, and I don't think he's had a poor game all season. I was just talking about him this week as being like one of the guys who he's so consistent. Every week you get a great game from him. He looked a little bit off today. He allowed a sack to Santos Knox. He let guys into the backfield there was an inside zone run where his guy just came flying right through and crushed McMahon. I think it was just a few plays where he just didn't look like the normal Peter Nicastro. And a few guys like that, I think, on both sides of the ball. But I think I'm going to chalk that up to guys they just can't wait for this to be over. Like, it's got to be so tiring. 6 weeks of games that don't matter in the standings. You're trying not to get injured, but you don't want to think that way. You're just exhausted of these games not mattering.
Ottawa or Toronto?
I'm talking about Toronto. Like, Ottawa's got their own problems, but like Toronto's just probably so tired of playing in these games that I think it's just easy to have a mental lapse. A couple of guys that just I didn't think Jordan Williams had a great game today either. There's just a few guys that we know are great players that have consistently been great performers all season long, and today they're ready for this to be done.
Yeah.
Receivers, another game for your man Ungerer. He's so good at being the last read. Like, just when you think that everything's falling apart, how many times today do we see Dukes go through like first read, second read, third read, start scrambling, stepping up? He's like, oh my goodness, and there's no one near Ungerer, and just flipping it out to him.
And that's a credit to Dukes as well. The Dukes, I mean, I had said that before, like, what is impressive about Dukes is he doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't make bad hero throws. He plays within himself, and he goes through his progressions. He's quite smart at the playbook. He knows where people are, and he's able to go through that. So like he is a cerebral quarterback out there.
For sure he is. And his receivers, Ungerer bailed him out a bunch of times. Sindani, I thought, made a couple really nice plays. Neal had a couple nice catches. They also let him down on a couple occasions.
Yeah, Cam Phillips looked a little rusty.
He did. And, he ended up with 4 targets, 1 reception for 5 yards. I feel like he normally brings in that deep ball. I know he got turned around the other way. That's a really hard catch to make. But Cam Phillips is a good receiver. Usually he makes that catch, and he didn't. He didn't quite look on. But that's why you play him in a week like this.
Right. I mean, it's like anything. You got to practice, right? Football is a sport that demands practice. When you're not practicing and you're not playing, you see it immediately.
And I think Agudosi showed a bit of that rust too. Like this is his first game action. He could have had just a walk-in touchdown or at least a huge gain if he ends up going out of bounds on that. Was that Toronto's opening drive, I think? And Dukes just lofted up a deep ball as he was getting drilled in the ribs.
Like, he should have caught that.
Yeah, it just went off his fingertips. And then Sindani led to Dukes' interception. Hits Sindani right in the hands, but it pops up in the air and gets picked off. And, just plays like that kind of let their quarterback down. But they made some great catches as well.
He targeted Sindani 9 times.
He loves Sindani.
He does. I mean, those two, like, that is practice field bromance.
It is, but that's we talked about that before. It's a very real thing. It's why Coxie and Kelly have that chemistry too. It's a guy that you in your unit, that's the most trusted guy. And obviously Dukes and Sindani have worked a lot together on the practice field. And he's like, "Where's Sindani? There's my guy." So, and that that's both good and bad. I think it's great because it forces you to read the whole field a little bit. But in a big game. With all the starters out there, that's not necessarily where you want to start with your reads. But again, for this, I thought was fantastic. Nine targets for Sindani. Defensively, they were good, but it was sort of hit and miss. There's some lapses too, but I think that's the mental fatigue that we talked about a little bit. Darius Pickett looked like the Darius Pickett from a few weeks ago. He's been a little bit quiet by his standards. But man, was he flying around the ball tonight? I thought he was everywhere. So he stood out on defense for me. Mason Pierce too.
I think he probably. I mean, obviously, a lot of key defenders were out. I'm sure he felt kind of an additional responsibility to kind of keep the form of that defense from totally collapsing. And he looked like an all-star. He was everything that we talked about all season. He doesn't have the thunder and the presence of McManus as I guess nobody sort of south of Darth Vader does, but Pickett was just such a smart, useful defensive weapon. I mean, I'm sure Coach just loves having him as a defensive coordinator. To have somebody like that you can plug in. Who can sack, who can play deep coverage, who can play underneath, who will tackle in space, is always in the right position. I mean, he's just a dream.
Yeah, and he looked like the Pickett that was flying around when the games mattered more, when the standings still were impacted. Pickett was all over the place every game. It's been tough the last few weeks. Guys have been in and out, like we said, but yeah, you're right. Today, he just decided to take over. And then Mason Pierce had another great game. This guy, it's amazing to me. I tweeted this out earlier in the evening too. Tavares McFadden and Mason Pierce have played so well at halfback. Now, Tavares had the night off tonight, but those two guys, when you go back into the middle of the season, when Toronto loses Robertson Daniel, who was having one of the best seasons of any defensive player in the entire football league, and Deshaun Amos, who was playing out of his mind. They lose both those guys.
No, and didn't drop a beat.
Nothing. Because Pierce comes in, and Pierce is actually like, I think he's actually playing as well as Robertson Daniel was playing. And this is a rookie.
He plays incredibly fast. He is, look, he's a twitchy athlete. Like, he really is. When you watch him out there, he is flying around the field.
And he's really smart too. You can see him pick up on stuff immediately.
His pedal to break is elite. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I mean, he has flaws, but his break on the ball as a defensive back is as good as any of the other guys on the team.
Yeah, and then to pair that with McFadden, who went from being like a ball hawk, like that was his thing at Florida State, was like he's the interception guy, speed guy, and he's as soon as he's switched to halfback, he's become like the thunder version of that, and he's just laying everybody out.
Loves hitting people. No, I know. I mean, again, it's a tribute to the coaching staff as well. I mean, these guys are terrific athletes, but almost everybody in the league is a terrific athlete. The fact that the coaches are able to identify who can fit into their system, they're able to teach their system in a way that makes the players so confident in knowing what they're doing that they can play fast. I'm biased, but I do chalk that up to coaching. I think when when replacement guys come in and you have no drop off, that is great coaching.
And I didn't think there were a ton of like poor performances on defense. I thought Edouard was a little bit off, but I think again he was put into a spot he wasn't expecting to be in, just like the whole defensive secondary, because they weren't expecting that late scratch.
And they're playing very vanilla.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like him to be more aggressive.
So is Ottawa.
Yeah, well, I think Ottawa just is vanilla. But this was the perfect game. Like, what a perfect situation, because you know they wanted that 16th win. Obviously, the Grey Cup matters more. I don't think there's any question about that. But they wanted the 16th win. That means something. You're in the history books forever. Like, you are down there on paper as tied with the best regular season team ever. That is something. And so they wanted that. But they really wanted to be able to do it without playing starters. And usually that's not possible. We've seen that each of the last 2 seasons. They couldn't get it done last year with the same formula. They didn't get it done against Edmonton of all teams 2 years ago. That was a terrible game. Ugh. And then this year they come out and those same guys in the same sort of positions with even less experience in some ways end up getting it done. So just a huge achievement for the team and for the coaching staff to get them in the right frame of mind, to get everybody to show up and play like this. I thought was huge. All right, JB, let's get to our players of the game and our plays of the game. So where are you going with your player of the game? There's a few options here, obviously.
Yeah, like honestly, part of me, like, I gave it to Mason Pierce last week, and he probably deserves it again, but I'm gonna, I thought we gave him his flowers last week. I think, Benji Franklin played great. And for a last second plug-in, he popped and was flying around the field, really confident in what he was supposed to be doing. And I think that is the common denominator among the guys that they bring in, even guys they bring in at the last second. They know the playbook so well that they are very confident about where they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to do. And that increases their game speed and their aggression. And I think he was an example of that. But for me, I have to go Pickett. He got nominated for defensive MVP. There might have been some chatter that maybe McManus, who's kind of come on in the last 4 weeks, should have been the guy. But you watch today, Pickett had 8 tackles and a sack. He's all over the field. He's playing all kinds of different positions. He is the game changer for the defense. McManus is the wall in the middle, but Pickett is what makes the defense special this year.
And just on your shout out to Mason Pierce, watch where he comes from on the interception he makes. Like, if you haven't seen that play, or if you watched it on TV and you don't remember, go back and find it. CFL tweeted at that play. Watch where Pierce comes from when he makes this play. And that will tell you the kind of athlete that we're dealing with here, the kind of film study he does, the instincts that he has. Those are elite on that play. It's because I couldn't figure it out when it happened. I'm like, why is he there? And when they showed the replay, I'm like, still saying, why was he there?
His end zone dancing, also top shelf.
Yeah, I that's less important, but
not as a defensive back is not.
I know, that's true. That's you need to be able to pull off the end zone dance when you get a pick six. It's an important part of it. Just like jumping in the water after a hole in one.
It is.
So for my player of the game, I'm going to go with Mason. Not Mason Pierce. I'm going to go with Cam Dukes. Again, a shout out to Mason Pierce because, like you said, I think he's right up there. But for Cam Dukes, like I said, 22 of 34, 317 with a touchdown, 40 yards rushing against most of Ottawa's starting D. And Ottawa's defense has had games. Like they've had some real performances. I know as a team they've been flat, they've had trouble, but they've got some good players on that D, and they were out there.
And honestly, I'd go back and look. I'm not sure how many times Chad got over 300 this year. It was not a consistent thing.
No, he didn't need to. We've
No.
talked about that before as well. Like Chad was shut down at halftime.
I'm just saying, like, if they get over 300 is like, that's not nothing. That's not just him, driving the car in another old 300, because that 300 over 300 has not been a regular number for the offense.
No, that's true. It's true. And usually they are running the ball a little bit better, but yes, they don't typically have those 300-yard games. So I think he deserves the player of the game. Where are you going for play of the game?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty good for a final game that didn't mean anything. I like the Brissett touchdown. It was kind of a CFL hat trick, if you will, right? He had one catch, one touchdown, one ejection. So he kind of put that kind of trio together, which you don't often see. He's earning himself some money. He's clearly shown himself to be a red zone target, a guy who will catch the ball and score. It'll be, I hope he re-signs with Toronto. I think he's been a really useful player. It's going to be hard to figure out what his price is, but he's a valuable part of the team, and he's a great guy on the deep pass as well. Like when he gets a chance, he does not drop the ball. He's a very efficient scorer. So I thought that was my play of the game. There was a great throw by Dukes and a nice route, and a dagger into Ottawa's season.
I think their dagger happened a while ago, but yeah. And I think
their season-ending hopes.
I believe Brissett, even though I think he only ended up with somewhere around the 600-yard mark on the season, which again is like that's not bad at all.
Pretty good for not being a key, really like a key starter.
Very quietly went about it, and I believe he has the same number of touchdowns as DeMonte Coxey. I have to check that out, but I think he ended up with the same amount of TDs as Coxey.
I thought he had a really good season. We had talked about it at the beginning of the year, what kind of season he might have, and I have to think this is the best case scenario for him. I think that this is who he is. Maybe not. Look, maybe he has another gear if he gets a regular start, but to me, I thought this was fantastic for him.
For play of the game for me, I got to go back to the Pierce pick six, just because I've never seen it. I've just never seen. I can't recall ever seeing somebody come from the opposite halfback spot, basically into the opposite flats for a pick that they seem to know right away from the moment the ball was snapped, right where the ball was going, when to be there. It was an unbelievable play. Now, I'm cautious in this because it also looked like it could have been the kind of play where you realize at the last second that you're out of position and you just bust your butt to get back there, and it happens to be that the ball's there too. But just knowing Mason Pierce, I can't think that that's what it is. But I have seen players do that before where they're like, oh, I'm supposed to be lined up here, and they take off, ball happens to come that way, and Bob's your uncle. But I just don't think that's the kind of player Mason Pierce is. So I'm going to give that to him and film study and tendencies. It's a remarkable play. So that's my play of the game. All right, JB, we got to wrap things up. So to go over our schedule for the next week, the Argos are on a bye as they watch Hamilton and Montreal battle it out. We will have our pregame walkthrough pod, although it's just going to be our bye week pod this week, as we go through all our regular stuff, but also look for what we're expecting from Montreal Hamilton, who we'd like to see come out of that matchup as well. And then we'll get into our regular weekly programming as the Argos get set to face whichever one of those two teams wins the game. If you haven't yet done so, make sure you buy tickets to the East Final. They've opened the upper deck on the East side. There's some great seats available. Get your tickets. Make sure you stop by Something in the Water Brewing on your way to the game. And go to the game, enjoy the game. It's going to be an awesome atmosphere. It looks like the ticket sales are going really well. So you definitely want to be there for that if you're an Argos fan. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are. That will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.